Welcome back to the Nosebleed section. If you can hear me, you are tuned in to episode 4 of From the Nosebleeds MMA Podcast. Whether it's YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or SoundCloud, I am Brigham Brick Harris, alongside my good friend and fellow fight fan, Blake O'Ruan, here to provide a weekly update for all things in the scrap world. Whether it be cage side or from the cheap seats, we've always got you. Special thanks to Robert Jemias and Don't Be Richard Music for helping us make this show run. Blake, thanks for joining me post Labor Day.
Thank you so much. It seems I really quickly, I just want to congratulate you. Brick got married this weekend.
Yes.
So for all of our listeners, send a little congratulations to Brick on our Instagram, on his personal Instagram. Very, very proud of you, Brick. That is awesome. Coming up in today's show, Weili Zhang wins her 115-pound title. What is next for the strawweights? Also, UFC 242, what we are looking forward to, some of the undercards, some other fights in the main card other than the main event. We also have our predictions for Khabib Nurmagomedov versus Dustin Poirier. Also, we will be talking about what happens if Dustin Poirier wins versus what happens if Khabib wins. But first, we want to turn it back on this Tuesday. Brick, what do you have for us today?
I see it only fitting to talk a little bit about the WEC since I'm speaking, and that's all for me, it's either the WEC or John Jones. That's my stuff.
That's Brick Harris for you.
I want to talk a little bit about Dustin Poirier's first career loss, seeing how Dustin Poirier is fighting on Saturday in one of the biggest cards, arguably the biggest card of the year, of the calendar year, and it's going to be in Abu Dhabi. In his WEC debut in 2010, I believe it was August 2010, Dustin Poirier fought against Danny Castillo. If you watch the fight, it's a good fight. Dustin Poirier is Dustin Poirier. He does what Dustin Poirier does. He stands. He has impeccable striking. But what Danny Castillo did in that fight to win, I mean, obviously, but to win impressively, was he took all the shots of Dustin Poirier beautifully, as well as he could, and he came back with takedowns. He came back with leg locks, and his ground and pound game was unreal. Winner by unanimous decision was Danny Castillo. Dustin Poirier walked away with his first loss, I believe, after 7 or 8 straight wins. But his WEC debut was tainted by the fact that Danny Castillo just beat him up. He took him to the ground, and he beat him up.
One of the things that I think is interesting about this take, and one of the reasons I agree, is that, yes, Dustin has, a stylistic mismatch here where if you have a really good grappler who can take you on the ground, you can't strike. That's just simple fighting, right? However, this was in August of 2010. 9 years have passed, and we have seen a lot of growth in Dustin Poirier. We've seen him be tested against some of the best fighters in the world. You take another submission artist like a Jim Miller, who he's defeated. You take these other fighters who are typically, he's fought a lot of strikers, but he's also fought a lot of grapplers and won some and lost some. However, it's been 9 years. He's grown, he's developed, and I think he's more focused coming into this week than he's ever been. And I think, hopefully, we'll see fireworks. Hopefully, we'll see a very competitive match between the two of them.
I do agree. He's very well prepared, but he's a wild card. He is. He's lost fights in weird ways. He's won fights against competitors in weird ways. We're going to talk more about that later, but let's get it started. Round 1, we're going to talk about Weili Zhang and her 115 title win just last weekend.
I thought that was incredible, what Weili Zhang did. She beats Jessica Andrade, and I just want to give a little bit of insight as to what I was thinking going into this fight. I thought that the Jessica Andrade win against Rose Namajunas earlier this past summer was a little bit of a fluke, because if you watch back the fight, Rose Namajunas had her in a Kimura submission, and all Andrade did was lift her up, slam her on the ground. I don't want to be the rule maker here, but I might be a little Jeff Van Gundy in terms of, I think that there should be a rule against slamming. If you can just pick someone up and slam them on the ground and knock them out that way, that's going to become more of an option in terms of, knocking someone out, especially when you're in a very sticky situation like a deep Kimura submission like she was in against Rose Namajunas. Now,
and you know what? We're taking Daniel Cormier's we're taking his wins away. if we're taking out body slams, then Daniel Cormier doesn't have a job. I'm sorry. Keep going.
So the win over Thug Rose bothered me. However, going into this fight, I thought Jessica Andrade was going to win this fight. And why do I say that? Is because it was the champion facing the number 6 prospect in Weili Zhang. Do you know how many fights Weili Zhang had going into this? 3. 3 UFC fights. I'm sorry, UFC fights. I didn't clarify that. Weili Zhang had 3 UFC fights going into this versus Jessica Andrade's 15. That's a big difference in comparing not only their records, but comparing the people that they've been through, their work, their resume. And we're going to talk about that more later as well. 15 UFC fights versus 3 UFC fights. There's a big learning curve there for the fighter who hasn't fought as much. But Weili Zhang shocked the world. And how did she do it? 21 unanswered significant strikes, and 42 seconds later, she proved that she is the strawweight champ for now. However, my question is, what happens next? Tatiana Suarez is a problem. Tatiana Suarez is probably one of the best, if not the best, women's wrestler in MMA right now. She just beat the number 3 ranked strawweight in Nina Ansaroff very, very convincingly. Tatiana Suarez versus Weili Zhang for the next title shot at the strawweight division. Whoever wins that fight, I think gets to take Thug Rose in her return, because I think Thug Rose does deserve a title rematch whenever she gets back.
I agree with you. I think Weili Zhang, as of right now, has proved herself to be the number 1 prospect and the number 1 fighter in the strawweight division, which in and of itself is an accomplishment. The women's strawweight division is stacked.
It is.
Thug Rose Namajunas, Joanna Jędrzejczyk, Jessica Andrade, Weili Zhang, Claudia Gadelha. I could go on. There are more fighters. Like you said, Tatiana Suarez. There are people that Weili can continue to fight and prove herself against. Now, as far as what's next, I think what will happen is Weili Zhang is going to have to fight former champs and rising stars, kind of like herself, kind of like Tatiana Suarez, fighters who she's going to need to test herself against, because the last few champions in the women's strawweight division have kind of been on the decline recently. Thug Rose obviously lost her belt. Joanna Jędrzejczyk has lost 3 of her last 4 fights.
Right.
Jessica Andrade just lost to Weili Zhang. Like, it's kind of a fresh start for the strawweight division, and for Weili Zhang, especially being the first Chinese champion. I want to reiterate that, in the women's strawweight division.
Absolutely. That was such an incredible feat, such an incredible performance. That's about it for round 1. Let's jump into round 2. UFC 242. Lots of big fights, the big fight it being the main event, of course. However, Brick, is there any specific fight that you are looking forward to, or anything about this card that really sticks out to you?
I think one fight, there's a few fights. I don't want to say that any fight is even close to as important as the main event, because to be black and white, plain and simple, it's not. There's no fight on this card that is nearly as important as Khabib versus Poirier, as it were. However, Edson Barbosa and Paul Felder is a very interesting fight. You have 2 guys who have a decent amount of losses. I think they're like 7 and 8 in the lightweight division, not necessarily in title contention, especially when you have guys like Tony coming back. You have guys like Conor coming back. The lightweight division is pretty stacked as it is. However, Edson Barbosa and Paul Felder will be pretty telling as far as who could be 3rd or 4th in line to face the champion of the lightweight division. I don't necessarily think that Edson Barbosa will hold a strap. I don't think he will. I don't necessarily see Paul Felder taking down any of these top lightweight guys, but the division is going to see a lot of action in the next 6 months to a year, and so it'll be nice to shuffle these names around. Paul Felder would be 17-4 after a win, and that's not a bad record at all. That's pretty good winning percentage. He's still in pretty good shape. Edson Barbosa would improve to 21 wins. So I don't know. I think it'll be a very telling fight as far as the lightweight division goes and the future they're in. But, I think there are bigger fish to fry this weekend.
100%. I agree with you. I think Felder wins this fight. I just want to throw this out there as sort of my idea of what's going to happen in this fight. Barboza has lost 3 of his last 4 against some really tough competition. However, as you say, the lightweight division is so stacked and it is so difficult to get to the top. I think one of these guys kind of floats up into the higher title contention area, whereas one kind of gets left and forgotten after this fight. With Edson Barboza, 4 out of your last 5 fights being losses is never a good thing on your resume. We'll see what happens. I'm also personally really excited for Curtis Blades to see what he can do with wins over Alistair Overeem and Mark Hunt. He might move back up the totem pole with a win, despite his 2 losses against Francis Ngannou, who we all know has been an absolute terror in the heavyweight division, has been cleaning up this 2019.
Round 3, here we go. Khabib versus Dustin Poirier and our predictions. I think this is going to be a pretty tough round, considering I think I'm, 0-2 on fight predictions, fight picks. So I'll let you go ahead and take the lead on this one, big guy.
Oh, shoot. Okay, so I want to break down what my thought process is, and that begins with Dustin being on a 5-fight win streak, and 4 of those people being world champions, being Max Holloway, Eddie Alvarez, former champ, Justin Gaethje, former champ, and Anthony Pettis, along with Jim Miller, a submission genius in himself, versus Khabib, who has fought RDA, who's lost 3 of his last 4, Michael Johnson, who's lost 4 of his last 6, and Conor, who was coming off of a couple years off, fighting Floyd Mayweather, coming in with an alleged foot injury and all these things. I'm not saying that this is an easy fight for Dustin by any means. It will be by far his biggest test yet. However, I think there's a lot of people that are going to be surprised at the fight that Dustin puts up, and this is why. Khabib has not been tested the way that everybody thinks. That 27-0 record, that perfect record, that undefeated, is so padded, and Dustin is a legitimate threat. He is a champion killer. He is a guy who has more than just, a punching chance, but he has a black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. He's a cardio machine. And if he can put the pressure on him the way that he put pressure on Max Holloway, do not be surprised if a lot of the casual fans are shocked that the brute force of Khabib Nurmagomedov is not enough to break down Dustin Poirier.
Here's one reason why I just might have to disagree with you. But hear me out. Khabib is possibly the most predictable fighter in the division. I think it's safe to say that when you fight Khabib, you sign up to wrestle, you sign up to ground and pound, you sign up to work on your cardio, basically. You run 15 miles in a span of 20 minutes with Khabib Nurmagomedov. He's an absolute animal. We know he's going to shoot. We know he's going to wrestle. However, Dustin Poirier is a cardio machine. He's a grinder. The fights that he has won against Alvarez, against Holloway, just the fights he's won in general, he shows how well his cardio has proven to be after camps. He's proven how strong and tough he can be, how good his striking is. But Khabib is a different type of pressure, right? Dustin Poirier is great pressure. He is. But Dustin Poirier does not have the same type of pressure as Khabib. I think Khabib is going to do what he's done to every single fighter, and he himself has said it. He's like, I have to maul him, in my best Khabib impression. My pick goes to Khabib Nurmagomedov. I don't think there's any surprise that happens in this fight. I think Khabib wrestles him. I think he grounds and pounds him. I think he beats him up. I see it being a TKO stoppage. I think this is so far one of the biggest tests for Khabib. However, Dustin Poirier is very similar to Conor McGregor. I'd say Dustin is a little less talented than Conor McGregor. I'd say he has a little better cardio than Conor. But seriously, Khabib has gone through some of the most diverse talents in the division, right? He's gone through Edson Barboza, who has possibly the best kicking game, the best long strikes in the division. He's gone through Conor McGregor, who has the best striking possibly. He's gone through Al Iaquinta, who has arguably the second best wrestling. He's gone through the division, right? And Dustin Poirier is nothing incredibly special. He has kind of a combination of those things, but we've seen Diamond lose in questionable ways. He got knocked out twice, in his career. He has struggled with what we talked about earlier with Danny Castillo getting ground and pounded and losing that fight to the decision. I don't see Dustin Poirier retaining his belt. I don't see this going any way other than the way it has gone for Khabib in every one of his fights in the UFC, which is smother, attack, get on top of, destroy.
Without a doubt, Dustin Poirier has his hands full. There is no doubt about it. And I don't mean for me to sound like Khabib is some sort of untested fighter that's going to get his stuff handed to him. That's not going to be the case whatsoever. I just think that Dustin has a will to win like almost nobody else in the UFC. His desire to beat Max Holloway, to get this shot at Khabib, he's been waiting for this for so long. He wants this so bad, and I think that there's really something telling about that when it comes to a UFC fighter. And I truly believe that if he comes in healthy, he really has a shot. I also want to throw in the fact really quickly before we end the round that that Khabib might not be 100% health-wise. A lot of AKA fighters aren't when they come into these fights. Khabib gets injured a lot in his fight camps. Daniel Cormier gets injured a lot in his fight camps. Luke Rockhold, Cain Velasquez. A lot of these AKA guys don't always come into their fights 100%. With that being said, maybe Dustin catches him. If Khabib decides to stand up and pound with Dustin like he did in that third round against Conor McGregor, which he lost, he might have another thing coming to him because Dustin is more tested. He has more reps at the moment, and if he's healthy, it could be over for Khabib.
I think we'll have to wait to see. Honestly, Saturday is going to be one of the most telling fights. I think I'm so excited for it just because these fighters are so different. They've traveled such different paths when it comes to where they are now and how they've gotten there. So I don't know. Saturday is going to be awesome. I'm so excited to see where it goes.
Let's jump into round 4. Dustin Poirier this week says that if he wins on Saturday against Khabib Nurmagomedov, he is the greatest 155-pounder of all time. Brick, my question to you is he, or what does he have to do in order to become that?
Short answer?
Go ahead.
No. Dustin Poirier is not fighting for the status of greatest of all time, although he may think that he is. He can say that to himself, and honestly, if I were him and I beat Khabib Nurmagomedov, I'd be pretty confident myself too, you know? But the fact of the matter is that Dustin Poirier has lost to Conor McGregor, he's lost to Michael Johnson, he's lost to the Korean Zombie. You know, he's lost fights, and he's had ups and downs in his career. He hasn't even fought his entire career in lightweight. I think it's a pretty loud claim for him to say he's the best 155er of all time if he beats Khabib. Here's what Dustin Poirier will become if he beats Khabib. You know what he'll be? He'll be the guy who beat Khabib.
100%.
He's not going to be the greatest 155er. Let's look at Matt Serra, right? Matt Serra took down GSP. Who is Matt Serra anymore? Matt Serra is the guy who stopped GSP when he was dominant. He was the king. He was a god. No one saw it coming. He was the underdog, right? So if Dustin Poirier pulls this off, which I don't think it's impossible, but it's just kind of, that's the way Khabib works. He gets your hopes up. You get these super cool, pre-fight hype videos, and then Khabib just goes in there and it's business as usual. He does what he does. If Dustin Poirier beats Khabib, he's not going to be the greatest of all time. He will be the most impressive to go against Khabib in Khabib's career, but there's still so much left for Dustin to have to do to be considered the best 155er. And there's one man I know he's going to have to face. Well, there's multiple. He's going to probably have to rematch Khabib in the future. I think Khabib would deserve the title shot after one person. He would have to rematch and beat Conor McGregor, and there's one guy I know he would have to fight after Khabib. And I can't wait because I know you want to tell me who it is.
I would love to talk about that, Brick. However, by the way, that Matt Serra thing, that was brilliant. That's exactly what will happen if he wins this fight. He will be the guy that beat Khabib. However, let's go into what he said, which is he's the greatest of all time at 55 if he wins. I'm just going to throw out a couple names before I even mention Khabib. BJ Penn has beaten Sean Shirk, former champ, Kenny Florian, Diego Sanchez, all legendary fighters. Beat them all in their primes when he was in his prime. Frankie Edgar defeated BJ Penn and Gray Maynard. One of them was a draw, which kept him the title. Another one, he actually beat him. Then Benson Henderson, who beat Frankie Edgar to take that title. Nate Diaz and Gilbert Melendez. Then you have Khabib, who has beaten Conor McGregor and took over the vacant title. Dustin has beaten 4 former world champs, but he has never been the champ himself. For Dustin to become the greatest 155-pounder of all time, he simply has to do 2 things. Number 1, he has to go into Abu Dhabi against all odds with the world against him as a huge underdog and defeat Khabib Nurmagomedov, who at this moment, today, in 2019, looks unstoppable. He's the John Jones of the lighter weights. He like, everybody thinks, oh, he's fighting Khabib. No, not a chance, right? If, and I say if, because it's not an easy fight. If he beats Khabib, he has to fight Tony Ferguson. And Tony Ferguson is a problem. And that's the person that you were alluding to earlier, Brick. Tony Ferguson, in my humble opinion, is the greatest 155er of all time. Has not lost since 2012. On an 11-fight win streak. Absolutely dismantles every single fighter that he goes up against. Did you see Anthony Pettis' face at UFC 229 after that fight? He was absolutely demolished. You see Cowboy Cerrone's eye? Tony Ferguson is a mixtape. The faces of Tony Ferguson, the things that Tony Ferguson does to people's faces are, it's like out of a horror movie. Not to mention, he is the best jiu-jitsu fighter in the UFC off of his back with a black belt, a 10th planet jiu-jitsu under Eddie Bravo. If Dustin Poirier wins this fight against Khabib, number one, he becomes the guy that beat Khabib. But for him to solidify that name, he has to defeat Tony Ferguson, who seems unstoppable. Same thing for Khabib. If Khabib wants to become the greatest 155er of all time, he has to defeat Tony Ferguson. All roads lead, as you spoke about a couple weeks ago, all roads lead to John Jones. All roads lead to Tony Ferguson in the 155-pound weight division, because we all know it's not going to be Conor. It's not going to be Gaethje. It's not going to be any of these guys. It is going to be Tony Ferguson who fights the winner on Saturday.
I'm not going to lie, though. He's smart for doing it, right? And we've seen athletes in the past do this all the time. We've seen Conor McGregor did it to Floyd Mayweather. Floyd Mayweather was the god of combat sports. 49-0, had never lost, the boxing king. And Conor McGregor used the name of Floyd Mayweather to make himself bigger, to promote himself. Dustin Poirier is doing the same thing. He's a great fighter. He's a great dude, and he's got great history in both the UFC and the WEC. But he's using the brand, which is Khabib Nurmagomedov, to promote this fight and say, oh, if I beat Khabib, no one's ever done it. I'm the best of all time.
Right. But here's what's interesting about that is they're very similar in terms of who was Floyd Mayweather and who was Khabib coming into this fight. Both undefeated, both with sort of padded records, right?
Very true.
It's going to be really interesting to see if this time Dustin gets the shot off of him. And I think that this time it's different because it's not a guy coming from a different sport and crossing over. It's somebody who's tested, and it's somebody who's beaten a lot of great fighters. Let's jump into round 5. Round 5, we are going to be talking about if Khabib wins, Brick, where is he all time? And who is next for him to fight?
So basically, same question of round 4, but this time about Khabib.
Correct.
Okay. Well, I mean, you basically said it all. All roads do lead to Tony Ferguson. I think no matter what happens, Tony Ferguson is next in line for a title shot, although you've got guys in the lightweight division who are going to be complaining and whining, i.e. Conor McGregor, saying, oh, I want a title shot, I'm back, blah, 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 give me the belt back. It's going to be Tony Ferguson. No question about it. However, in terms of greatest 155er of all time, what this means for Khabib, honestly, I think it's really early to say greatest of all time for anyone in any division. Here's what I have to say about Khabib. Khabib, he is a cheat code. Khabib is the Steph Curry of UFC. He has taken the technical, the typical fighting or the typical talent away from the sport and has just gotten his own thing, which has made him be successful for a decade. No losses. He has changed the game, like I said. He has unbelievable wrestling, unbelievable cardio. He and his team have put this game plan together of we are going to be incredibly strong. Our wrestling and takedowns are going to be literally unstoppable, and then we're not going to let you breathe. They have completely broken the game. They have taken down incredibly talented fighters. They have ruined talented fighters who are arguably more talented than Khabib, like Conor McGregor, Edson Barboza, Al Iaquinta. These guys are very talented, but Khabib and his team have put together the whole wrestle, ground and pound, dominate. That is the game plan. So if this continues to happen, Khabib, after this win, I don't think it'll do much for his greatest of all time because this is just another notch in his belt, right? He fought fighters who were coming out of injury. He's fought fighters who didn't have a lot of time to know what they're getting themselves into. Dustin Poirier has 5 losses. He's I don't know how old he is, but he's been fighting for a really long time, 15 years. And so, I don't know. Khabib has not yet faced the cream of the crop. If Khabib were to win this fight and then fight and beat Tony Ferguson, I know we're getting really, really pretentious, right? But if he were to fight Tony Ferguson and beat him in the future, then that's it. Okay, I'll take a nap. I will hang up my mic and my shoes, and I will go into a long MMA hibernation for the lightweight division, knowing that after he does this, Khabib, yes, if he takes down and beats Tony Ferguson, yes, greatest 155er of all time, sure.
100%. And I would completely back you up in saying that Khabib does have that style that is really almost unbeatable if you are the best at it. However, we'll have to, and this is a big what if. What if Dustin stands up? What if Khabib wants to test his striking? If Khabib wins this fight, if Khabib can do this, he finally has a real, he starts to build a real resume. He's beaten a Conor McGregor, who I know I talked about earlier, broken foot coming off of the layoff, but people won't remember that. People remember that right now, but people won't remember that in 2-3 years, right? If he can beat Dustin, who has been on a tear for the last 3 years, I think he absolutely builds his resume as one of, if not the greatest 55er of all time. But again, like I said in my last round, it has to come down to Tony Ferguson. He has to beat Tony Ferguson. Khabib's ability to his ability to swarm and to hold him down and all those different things, that's going to be very telling in this fight of how good he really is at it. Because Dustin is a better ground fighter than Conor. Dustin is a better ground fighter than a lot of these other guys. So I honestly, I'm just really excited to see what happens. However, if he does beat Dustin, he gets a huge feather in his cap, a huge nod from a lot of real, true MMA fans who truly understand how great Dustin is and how great Khabib is if he were to beat Dustin because of how tested Dustin is. It's kind of like the same thing as we were talking about with Weili Zhang and Jessica Andrade. 3 fights versus 15 fights in the UFC. Khabib's been in the UFC for a long time, but it took him a while to build up that because of the rise of Conor McGregor and all those things in the 55 division. It's taken him a long time to get to the top, and now that he's at the top, he's the guy that beat Conor. You can't touch him, you can't talk to him. But Saturday we see how good he really is, and I texted you that yesterday. I said I have no idea who to pick for this fight because I'm so torn on: is Khabib really that good, or is he just not tested enough? And we'll have to see on Saturday. That's all I can say.
We are either going to see the world be completely turned on its head when Dustin Poirier knocks out Khabib, because that's the only way he's going to win, in my opinion. We're either going to see that happen, the world just be shocked, or we're going to say, okay, let's get Tony Ferguson going, because we just watched Khabib solidify his already pretty good reputation, but now he needs even more of a test, which there's no one else in the lightweight division who can test him the way Tony Ferguson will.
And it's a different animal. 10th Planet Jiu-Jitsu is purely based off of your back, the rubber guard, the way that you submit, the different leg locks and all those things. It's strictly made for MMA to be on your back, to have a wrestler against you who's smashing your face, and you can still defend yourself and you can still fight against it. That's why Eddie Bravo created it. So if Khabib wins and he moves past, we get to see the funnest matchup possible in the UFC right now. A 10th Planet Jiu-Jitsu guy versus one of the best wrestlers in the entire world.
This is so cliche, and I'm blown away I haven't said this yet, but in 6 months, we will possibly see an unstoppable force against an immovable object. Right?
Yeah.
Tony Khabib, unstoppable force, immovable object. That is possibly the greatest lightweight matchup we will ever see.
And if Khabib wins this fight, I'm pretty sure that's going to be the majority of what we're going to be talking about next week.
Give me some of that.
All right. We are going to jump into our final takes.
All right, there you have it. It was a loaded show, a full 5 rounds of Ftn Podcast. However, after the bell rings, there's still a little bit more to be said. That is why we are going into final thoughts. Blake O'Rulian, floor is yours.
UFC 160, a 19-0 fighter from Dagestan forfeits a part of his purse after weighing in 2.5 pounds over the limit. UFC 178, this same fighter suffers a knee injury and cannot fight Cowboy Cerrone. UFC 187, this fighter once again cannot fight due to a knee injury. The Ultimate Fighter Season 22 finale. This guy cannot fight Tony Ferguson because of an injury that was undisclosed. UFC 209. This fighter cannot fight Tony Ferguson because of weight cut complications. Woody Allen once said, 80% of life is simply showing up. When you have a job, one of the most important things is simply showing up. If you show up, you get paid. If you get paid, you can live your life comfortably. Khabib has not shown up to work 5 times in his career. He has had to quit. He has lost money. He has dodged. Khabib's undefeated record is the biggest lie in MMA. Did he lose to Cowboy? No, but he didn't beat him. Did he lose to Tony? No, but did he beat him? No. Does Tony just so happen to be the matchup Khabib can't beat? Maybe. A great striker, insane cardio, the best jiu-jitsu off of his back in the UFC. When you don't show up to work, there is punishment. Take any job in the whole world. If you don't show up to that job on the biggest day 5 times, you get punished. Or at least you lose some credibility. Khabib has an undefeated record. It looks perfect, and he looks unstoppable. But he didn't show up 5 times. Cowboy made weight. Tony made weight. There has to be something to show for that. A spot on his record, an asterisk next to his name. Let's look at John Jones. He is undefeated, but he was disqualified and now has a loss next to his record. In what world is not showing up better than actually showing up for your job? Khabib has not shown up to work in some of his biggest moments against some of his toughest matchups. To the casual fan, they would never know about this. To a true fan, it's used against him. Saturday, Khabib can change that. Saturday, he faces his toughest matchup yet. If Khabib can get past Dustin, it truly proves how great he is. If Khabib beats Tony, he is the greatest lightweight of all time. Maybe he needs to change gyms to stop getting injured. Maybe he needs to change coaches to more effectively cut weight. Maybe he just needs to show up for work.
Blake, what do you remember most about elementary school? For me, it was the different dynamics of each grade, right? You have 6th graders. Those were the cool kids. They had already experienced it all. They were already up there. Then you have the kindergarten kids, right? They're excited to be there. They just got out of pre-K. They're full of energy. They're naive. They just got there, and they feel like they're just getting some experience under them. Then somewhere in the middle, there were the 2nd, 3rd, and 4th graders in the middle of their childhoods, in the middle of their juvenile scholastic experiences. They've been battered. They've been bruised. They've been through kindergarten, 1st, 2nd grade, but they still have some ways to go, right? They still have 5th and 6th grade, for example, to get through. So they're a little bit battered and bruised. Some of them have already caught the screw around in class bug. I know I caught that in around 2nd or 3rd grade. Others, developing through that same stage, they were trying to stay away from that, but they somehow got caught up with those kids who were messing around, and they somehow found themselves in trouble. Now, all of this nonsense aside, let's compare as much of that as we can to the UFC, right? Heavyweights, 6th graders. They've been through it all. They're very mature, or at least they seem very mature. They have great experience. There's not a whole lot of bad blood in the heavyweight division. You got Daniel Cormier, Stipe Miocic, Junior Dos Santos, Francis Ngannou, very experienced and familiar and respectful guys, okay? Now let's jump down to kindergarten, flyweight division, Henry Cejudo.
Watch it. You better watch it.
Naive, okay? Full of energy. Just happy to be there. He's finally made it, right? He's popular, and he's calling everyone out. He's kicking people off the playground. He's stealing kids' candy and gum, and he's kicking people off the hopscotch lines, right? Then there towards the middle, you've got the kids who are starting to screw around and see what they can get away with. Let's call them the lightweights. The lightweight division right now is full, and I mean full, of all different types of fun personalities and what have you. Khabib Nurmagomedov is just serving a suspension for having attacked someone in the crowd. Dustin Poirier is the kid who's, really trying hard to not get caught up in the shenanigans. Tony Ferguson, who misses a ton of school because he stays homesick or whatever. Donald Cerrone, the kid who got held back. Justin Gaethje is always wobbling on the playground for who knows why. Conor McGregor, the bad kid, the cool kid. We could liken all of these divisions unto an elementary school. And you know what? Principal Dana White is doing a good job in some divisions, and he's having a hard time corralling some of these crazy, crazy kids.
While we were in studio recording this episode, we've received breaking news. Chris Cyborg will sign with Bellator. Brick, what do you think about that?
Well, as I said a few weeks ago, I knew this was going to happen. You can call me Mystic Brick, just as Mystic Mac was called a few years ago. Chris Cyborg will fight in Bellator. She will be absolutely dominant, and then there will be a champ fight, Amanda Nunes, Cyborg 3, and we will see that incredible rematch.
Very excited to hear about that. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of From the Nosebleeds podcast. We will be back next week to cover everything UFC 242. Remember to tune in to SoundCloud, YouTube, Apple Podcasts, and Spotify.
Remember, Saturday, we are either going to see the world be turned on its head or watch the continuing dominance of Khabib Nurmagomedov. Next week, we will be talking about that incredible fight and giving you more analysis in what is happening in the MMA world.
Make sure to follow us on our Instagram. We'll be doing live streaming of the main event with Khabib and Dustin. We will also be having analysis, polls, talking back to you guys back and forth. And it's going to be a lot of fun. This time, Brick will be there with us, with Robert and myself as well. So we are very excited for that. Thank you so much again for listening. Don't be a Richard. Send us out.